Russian officials from the financial sector have increasingly started writing to Vladimir Putin about a possible crisis next summer, the Washington Post reports, citing a source. Officials warn that a decline in budget revenues without a new tax increase will lead to a growing deficit. At the same time, pressure on the banking system is steadily mounting, due to high interest rates and extensive corporate borrowing to finance the war against Ukraine, the newspaper notes in its report. Officials and business people are expressing concerns at the same time as European oversight of Russian oil supplies is tightening, since revenues from its sale continue to decline. Russia's economy could approach the point of no return by 2026 due to an excessive shift toward military production, at the expense of the civilian sector, said the European Union's Special Envoy for Sanctions, David O'Sullivan, in an interview with The Guardian. The Russian government is already preparing to halt funding for all state projects from the National Wealth Fund, writes Reuters. According to a source cited by the agency, the initiative comes from the Ministry of Finance and is linked to the sharpest drop in oil and gas revenues in 5 years. Another sign of an impending crisis in the construction sector. The largest Russian developer, Samolet, has asked the Russian government for emergency assistance in the amount of 50 billion rubles. In exchange, they offered a blocking stake in their shares. The point is that since the summer of 2022, Russia has launched a program of mass preferential loans. This in turn led to a crazy surge in real estate prices, writes the Telegram channel Istrebin. With the war ongoing, the government began to gradually reduce the mass preferential loan programs, but prices still did not fall and housing remained unaffordable. This problem is systemic in nature. Without preferential loans, no one will buy apartments at these inflated prices. In fact, most people simply can't. And after that, other developers will collapse as well, since this is already a pyramid scheme that the government is unable to sustain.
Friends, the Kremlin bunker rat has received some unpleasant news. According to the Washington Post, the Kremlin dictator has received a warning. In written form, because the internet is reading about the possibility that the Russian economy may face collapse and a crash by summer. From his trusted economists. On the one hand, this is good news, and it explains a lot. It explains why the shelling has intensified and why diplomacy has become more active and changed format a bit. They're in a hurry, that's obvious. They're rushing and saying that they need to make it in time. They need to squeeze Ukraine, get what they want before summer, otherwise. And that's something we can only be glad about. But is there really anything good to expect from this? Because in the bunker, they've completely lost their minds. And it's been that way for a long time. Because he received the same warnings at the end of summer. At the end of the summer of 1925, he was warned that in the fall, preferably at the beginning or at the very latest, the middle of autumn, there should be peace negotiations. Real peace negotiations, to postpone new sanctions and ease the old ones. Otherwise, there will be irreversible processes. Did he listen? No. He didn't listen, and in October he got sanctions from Trump, which turned out to be very painful. Blows to the shadow fleet, a hardening of Europe's stance, and a whole bunch of other troubles. Even though he was warned as well. So it's quite possible that this time too he'll just lower his head, put out his horns, or whatever he has, and charge straight into a concrete wall. Instead of heeding the warning, he just accelerates harder and harder until he smashes his head. Hopefully this will happen at the beginning of summer. Well, at least. Donald Trump, as usual, spoke optimistically and said that peace is probably coming soon, that we are closer than ever before. Not quite, Mr. Donald. In order to end the war, Putin needs to present something to his subjects. And that something has to be at least the entire Donbass, which he will claim to have protected from the terrible Nazis. That's why a major offensive awaits us ahead. Right now, they are pressing from two sides in one direction. Most likely in the spring, closer to summer, a major offensive will begin. By the way, you can read about this, about the offensive and the Kremlin's plans, tomorrow morning on the Sazonov official Telegram channel, or on the Facebook page Kyryl Pravdorub in the video. Tomorrow, I know for sure I won't have time, so I'll write the article this evening, post it tomorrow morning, and then focus solely on my own business. So friends, subscribe and read. The links are in the video description. Donald Trump's optimism is encouraging. It's being broadcast on all the TV channels, but as we already know, we've heard this more than once before. The pessimism of Russian economists is much more pleasing because this month, in January, over the past month, we have eliminated more occupiers than they were able to mobilize. They managed to mobilize about 22,000 as far as I remember, but they lost 30,000. But in their mobilization plans, mainly through contracts, they plan to recruit conscript soldiers. For contracts they want by 2026, their plan is 400,000 people. That's, a little more than 30,000 per month. And the fact that they won't have the money for this is very good. Moreover, buying spare parts for missiles, drones, electronics, and so on is also quite expensive. That's why the economic crisis in Russia is our main ally. We wait, we keep working. Friends, subscribe to Televaya and Facebook. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested. Ukraine will prevail.